a point in the book, Lara, that you wrote about calling off the engagement. So I would love to hear about, the bump in the road, because, we all know on our journey through life, it isn't just plain sailing. There are going to be ups and downs. So talk us through the bump along the road, and how you were able to resolve it, how your relationship with Allah came into play in that scenario. And yeah, essentially, let's hear it.
We had our bump in the road because there was a point basically where I was expressing something and I didn't feel like I was being heard, and I really wanted to be heard in my marriage. I wanted to be heard. I wanted to be valued. I wanted us to be having respect at the same level. I didn't want to be in a relationship where, as all of society does, really is like just, very dismissive to women, like, oh my God, you're just being crazy. Oh, so over dramatic. I didn't want, I'm not being dramatic. This is a valid concern. And if you're not going to take it seriously, if you're going to default right to those society tropes about women, then this isn't going to work, because I'm a real human being that you have come to know and appreciate and care for and love. And I've shared so much about myself with you. And if when in this moment I'm telling you something, you're not going to actually listen to it, you're going to default to oh God, women are so dramatic. They don't really mean what they say, blah, blah, blah. Then what are we doing? Because you're clearly not I'm a real person. I'm not just a caricature of a woman on a movie. And so that's what I felt was happening or had the potential to happen. And so I was like, okay, hold up. We're gonna, let's call time, right? Let's end this. Because if that's the direction it's going, that's not where I want to go. And if that's the direction it's going to lead to all of the other people being right. We told you so. Why did you think this is going to work? Blah, blah, blah. All of that negativity would have been right. So, what mattered to me in that moment, and at this point we had already announced our engagement and all of those things. So I was going to have to tell people we're no longer engaged. I'm calling off the wedding and all of this stuff. But in that moment, again, I did not care. It's much more better for me to cancel an engagement than to go through a divorce. That's fine. Send an email saying you don't have to get an outfit and come. I'm cool with that. And so again, really focusing in on me and my life and how it's going to affect me every day, right? Because that's what you always hear, right? You don't know what's happening behind closed doors. And it happened to be, while we were talking also, that some friends were getting a divorce who on the outside looked picture perfect. So to witness wait, what happened? That oh, behind closed doors, it's a mess and it's terrible. I was like, oh snap, behind closed doors, this better be all right. I do not care what it looks like on the outside, because the majority of your life is behind closed doors. So who cares if on the outside it's looking one way when the inside you're miserable? So I was just really focused on what's happening on the inside, what's happening on the substance. And if that's right, whatever it looks like on the outside, let it be. And
to give the male perspective on this. So when I was presented with this ultimatum, I guess if we were to call it that, I had a choice to make, right? In the sense that you could, so the problem with the men, Muslim men in particular, but men in general, is the thought that if you just sincerely say, hey, I want to get married and I'm ready to be married, maybe more, I'm ready to be married, right? That's it, ding, 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 you're already perfect, because there's so many women waiting to get married. Man, you're doing them a favor. You're doing a favor to all these women that you're getting married. And Hollywood makes it seem Prince Charming, just as he is, he's just perfect. He doesn't have to change. He doesn't have to adapt. He doesn't have to do anything. Just as he is, as his mother birthed him, he's amazing. The girl has to adapt and change and do this and do that. But the man, as he is, he can just show up and the woman is just going to sort of fall into place, right? And that's what the lesson that I had to learn was that, well, am I willing to change for this relationship? So at that point, there were only really two options: change, right? Hear Zahra out for what she's saying, not how she's saying it, or me, the picture of myself, or whatever it is. No, let me just hear the words and put myself in her shoes and just take that message as is, as close to her perspective as possible, and take it to heart. No. Or the initial thought was what is this girl talking about? I'm just going to let's break it off. I'll find somebody else. If I'm serious about marriage, I'll find somebody else. That was the initial innate lower self thoughts that I had. Not very sophisticated and definitely self-destructive. Right. And then I made the choice. And to me, what it came down to comes from that independence and comes from my own internalizing of Islam. When somebody says, when the Prophet ﷺ says marriage is half the faith, half the deen, right? Half the way of life. The way I internalize it, it means that you have to bring the other half to the table, right? In the sense that even if your marriage gives you half, if you don't bring in the other half, it's incomplete, right? And most of us check out like, well, I got the half of the marriage, so I'm just going to go and nap now. Like, no, like I had to bring my half to the table to make this whole. And I was not at that time, as Zara pointed out repeatedly, I was not bringing my half to the table. So I had to make, to me, it was like, well, even if I go talk to another girl, it's going to be some other problem in me not bringing my half. It may not be the same issue, but it's always going to be something. So it was about me taking 100% responsibility for my half of this religion that I still needed to provide for myself, independent of Zara. You could have exchanged her for any other person. I will have had to still struggle in this way in my own self. And that's what alhamdulillah, I made that choice that I was like, no, I am going to change. I am going to take care of my half. And thanks to her, I mean, if it wasn't for her who rang the alarm, so to speak, right? Like, who knows what I've ended up now? Like, so I'm grateful for her to have pointed that out to me because, yeah, I was like, yeah, like I'm handsome, I'm young, I'm successful. Like, who wouldn't want to marry me? Right. But like she's pointed out that it's not about all these external labels. It's about more important things inside. And so standing up for herself and for her marriage and just echoing what you're saying, putting 1000% emphasis on how it is going to be on the inside as opposed to how it's going to look. Because there were many things look very quote unquote bad, if you will. Like I was a broke graduate student. Like I asked for her hand and her parents came to my house. I literally had no furniture. They sat on the floor. I didn't have a sofa. All I had was books and a bed and a desk to study. That's it. I had no kitchen equipment, barely had plates. And I invited them over I was like, you need to come and see this house for yourself to see this is the lifestyle that I'm going to provide for you in the short term. And if you're expecting something different, you need to go somewhere else because I'm not going to be able to provide it at this time. This is not my end all be all aspiration to have no table and no forks, but for now, this is what it is. And it's not going to change immediately. And so on the outside, if I worried about that, then it looks quote unquote very bad. But for us, we put the inside to matter more. And as Zara mentioned, as you mentioned with the book, one of her musts was respect. And one of my big musts was passion. So I wanted to have a passionate, loving marriage. And a lot of that manifests closed doors. I mean, you know, outdoors, you don't really even see it that much. And so for us, it was really the emphasis on the inner workings of our forever after, as opposed to the optics.
Trusting in Allah too is that when we reached that point, like we had been trusting in Allah in like so many different ways, like throughout the courtship process, right? To first trusting to share openly our hopes and desires and dreams and our shortcomings and our failings and our, you know, insecurities. So trusting that, okay, I trust that I'm good enough as I am. I trust that Allah made me good enough as I am so that I can just share all of that about me. And again, it was the same line of thought in my head. It was like, I don't want this person to, after we get married, ever say like, I didn't know, or you didn't tell me that, or this is a surprise. Like, you know, we'd go out, some days I'd wear makeup, some days I'd wear no makeup. I didn't want to say like, I didn't know what you really looked like. Like, no, I, you know, told you about, you know, my whatever insecurity or this thing I'm embarrassed about or ashamed of, so that you would never say that. So trusting Allah I can share all of these things. And again, it could be any person, but to believe that there's going to be someone who is going to be like, okay, that just means you're human. Like, you're just a human. Like, I'm not going to be like, oh my God, you did that, or you, whatever, like that I can just share it. And then when it came time, when we were reaching that kind of tension and I was like, okay, I'm going to call it off. It was really full trust. Like I sat with it for like I think it was a few days, 2 or 3 days. Like, is this really what I want to do? And I was like, you know what? I trust Allah. Like, I trust that if this isn't the thing for me, I'm not going to stay in this relationship out of fear that no one else is going to come. Oh, let me just enumerate all of his good qualities, you know, blah, 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 and just ignore this thing that's really like giving me heartache. Like if it's giving me heartache now, like it's not just going to disappear. So I trust that Allah is going to provide for me, and I'm gonna let it go, because I have to work with what I have. I cannot work with what I hope may happen in the future. Maybe things will change when we get married, inshallah. Like, this is what it is right now. And there is no indication that anything could be different in any future point in time. And if this is not what I want as it is right now, I have to leave. And so it was from that place of trust that I was able to do that. And I think that's another point that many people break up and come back together, like, you know, oh, we broke up, we're not talking anymore, we got whatever. But it's not, it's more of a threat. It's more of an ultimatum threat, like, well, if you don't do this or this, and like, we're done. But for me, like, I had already, like, I was done in the sense, like, no, that's it. Like, we don't, even he's like, oh, can we call to talk about it? I'm like, we don't need to talk, it's over. So we don't need to talk. Like, I'm not saying this so that we can talk and make up. I was like, no, we're actually done. So you don't need to call me. Like, you can delete my number. I already like started yours. Like, it's okay.
Yeah, I don't want you to brush over the strength of character and the faith that it takes, the faith and the trust in Allah that it takes to make such a huge decision, especially when you have been waiting. Yeah. So I really, just because I want this lesson to be applicable even for people who aren't necessarily in the situation of, you know, looking for a spouse. They may be waiting for a job and interviewing. And I know Brother James's story, so I know that this might resonate a bit as well. But they know that this isn't for me. This, you know, I'm negotiating the salary and I'm still not guessing my worth, but I've been out of work for the last 2 months and I need a job, or whatever the situation it may be. I really want this particular story to land with everybody who's listening to this, regardless of whether you're looking at this from a marriage scenario or from a life scenario. So I want to just emphasize that point. What gave you that strength, that trust? What is it in your journey? Is it in your upbringing? I know that you had said at different points in time going through school, you know, you had, you know, asked yourself, is there anybody for me? And your mom had said that Allah will provide. What gave you that unshaking faith that even though I've been waiting, this person has come who seems to be on my wavelength, it doesn't seem to be working out, but I'm going to let it go. And I trust that, you know, something that's better for me will come if this isn't for me. Not everybody can do that. So what is it? What is it? What are the granular ingredients? What happened in your life that allowed you to come to this moment with that strength and that faith?
What it was for me, which I think is universal and everyone can relate to, is that lying with your head on the pillow and feeling at peace. And there was so many days and nights that I did not feel at peace. You know, I felt, you know, experiencing racism. I didn't even experience like any like, you know, overt attacks or anything like that, but just feeling like being like, you know, people, you speak English? Like just these overt, you know, subtle things that make you always feel inferior. So constantly feeling inferior, constantly being underestimated, constantly worrying, am I good enough, trying to be good enough, trying to excel at school, trying to do all those things, and being able to lie my head down on the pillow and like feel at peace with myself. And so knowing for me, what the granular thing was, is like, there's just me in my life. Like it does not, the overriding thought above everything else was like, it literally does not matter what it looks like. You know, like how many celebrities have to commit suicide for us to really appreciate that, like, it doesn't matter if you have the money, the fame, the fans, the this and the that, if you are unhappy with yourself when you lie down your head on the pillow. And so that feeling crystallized for myself, and also just seeing the marriages around me that like, they're unhappy. It's clear that they're unhappy. They're pretending to be happy. And like, well, like, I'm already kind of, you know, doing okay, maybe slightly unhappy on my own. I'm not going to get into some lifelong expensive commitment to like make that worse. Like, at least I can trudge along by myself. Maybe single life is hard or whatever, but like, I'm not going to do something knowingly that like already I don't feel good about, and to make it worse. So that allowed me to be like, you know what? It even didn't even necessarily, at the moment that I made that decision, I wasn't even at the level of thinking and being so trusting in Allah. I was really just selfishly thinking for myself, for my life. After 5 years, after 10 years of, am I gonna like, man, what? Because I was too afraid to let a good guy go, because I was too afraid that no one else would come, because I was afraid what people would think, that like you got engaged and then you broke it off and already it took you forever to get engaged. And because I was afraid of all of that talk or chatter or whatever, I knowingly set myself up in something that felt bad at the time that I did it, wishfully thinking that somehow it's going to feel better later. Like I just couldn't do it. I was like, it knowingly feels not the way I want it to feel right now. So I rather not. So that granular level, if you're thinking about a job or whatever, and you're like, I'm so desperate, like that desperation will be a disservice, will self-sabotage you. And so it's having that long-term view. And yes, for me, it was thinking long-term, thinking 10 years down the line. Like, you know, if you're raising an issue, I mean, we talk about this in the book. The things that you ignore in the beginning are the reasons that you leave in the end. So if you're raising an issue now and it's not getting heard, it's only going to get worse. Like, there's no way that it, like, if it doesn't get resolved, that means it's just going to keep staying unresolved. So having that long-term view is one way. And then the second way is to really up your trust in Allah and to believe and know that Allah wants good for you, wants better for you, and that He has better for you.